While it is true that a lot of times dogs and cats can actually live together in the same household without much incident, there are times where it can actually go completely and utterly wrong. So we're going to talk about what is happening when it does go right, when it does go wrong, and some of the things that we can do to make sure that we are doing appropriate interactions between dogs and cats and setting them up to be successful in sharing a household and sharing space and living together. So a lot of times dogs can have exposure to a certain cat or cats, and a cat or cats may have exposure to certain dogs or dogs, but that doesn't necessarily automatically mean that that specific dog is going to be okay with all cats, or that specific cat is going to be okay with all dogs. It just means that they have had previous exposure to a cat or a dog and haven't necessarily had much incident, negatively that is. So we do have to take into consideration its different circumstances for each dog and for each cat. But I would say one of the most common mistakes that I do see that actually contributes to dogs and cats not being able to successfully share a household together is the way in which we do the initial introduction. So a lot of times what happens is we either just bring the dog directly into the house, or we bring the cat directly into the house. We kind of plunk them on the ground. They have access to each other, and then things can kind of go haywire from there. So we can take some extra additional steps to help the dog and the cat, or the cat and the dog, get a little bit more used to each other. It's more slow and gradual, so they have a chance to acclimate themselves to the scent of the new animal, the sounds of the new animal, just the animal's general presence, before we actually have them get used to and acclimate to the sight of the new animal. So what we want to do is do slow introductions. So when we bring the new cat or the new dog home, we want to make sure that cat has their own separate space and dog has their own separate space. I would actually avoid any visual for the first couple days. So what we want to do is have the dog behind a closed door and have the cat behind a closed door. They can maybe interact underneath the door, but we don't want to have direct line of sight right away. Another thing that we can do is called scent exchange. So we can take something that the cat has been laying on and has their scent on it, and also the dog, and we can exchange that. So the cat is getting used to the dog smell, and then the dog is also getting used to the cat smell. So, and we want to do this over a few days to a week, or even a couple weeks, gradually. We don't just want to plunk the new cat down into the environment or plunk the new dog down into the environment. We want to make sure that everyone has a chance to kind of, figure out what's going on. There's a new animal in the house, so they can have a chance to get used to each other. So making sure that we have barriers in place. So once our animals have gotten a chance to smell and hear the other one, we can start doing some partial visuals. So this is where you're going to want to have like a baby gate or some fencing or something like that, so there's some separation between the dog and the cat. And then I would also throw a blanket or a towel or something so their visual is mostly obstructed, so they can see a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to slowly peel back that blanket so they have more visual access to each other. And in the presence of each other, we're going to do really fun activities. So for your cats, that could be playing, it could be catnip, it could be food rewards, something like that. It could be sitting in your lap, getting some love and some pets. On the other side of the gate, we're going to have our dog. We're going to have them on leash because we don't want them to have too much close contact. But same thing, we're going to do playing games, love and pets, maybe food rewards, anything like that. And what we're doing is we're making a positive association to the presence of the other animal. So, hey, when you are in presence of other animal, whether it's the dog or the cat, awesome things actually happen. So we want to make a positive association. Another thing that we want to make sure that we absolutely prevent is any sort of chase behavior from the dog mostly. So that's where, when we've been doing this for a few days or even a week and all of the barriers start to come down, we definitely want to make sure that our dog is tethered somewhere. So on a leash and either tethered to maybe a stairway banister, or the couch or a chair leg, something where they can't move, or even tethered to you, because what we want to prevent is the chase. So relationships between dogs and cats can be a little bit tricky because cats are both a prey and a predator animal. Dogs are mostly predator animals, so even the sight of a cat and how cats move can immediately trigger and activate that predator instinct and response in the dog. So we want to make sure that the dog does not have a chance to practice those unwanted behaviors from the get-go, because if our dog chases, then that's going to become an enjoyable activity for them, and it's a lot harder to break the chasing pattern and go back and reestablish a foundation and positive interactions than if we prevent the dog from actually doing that behavior in the first place. And not all dogs are going to chase, and that's totally fine. It's completely dog dependent. Like I said, it's individual, so it's an individual dog and an individual cat acting together, so we don't necessarily know how it's going to go. It could go really great. So for example, for my cat Butters and my dog Tucker, we did some very slow introductions, and those two were buddies from day one and acted like they had known each other forever. And that's not necessarily the case, but sometimes it is. Like sometimes dogs and cats are just like, hey, I like you. And the other one's like, I really like you too. I think we can coexist. But we want to make sure that we're not necessarily treating it as something that's going to go really, really well, because if it does happen to go not so well, then we don't necessarily have a backup plan, and then we have to undo all of the negative associations and interactions that our dog and cat may have had. So also, another main difference between dogs and cats is the way that they communicate via body language. So it can be very, very difficult for dogs and cats to read each other's body language, and what they're actually meaning by that. For example, low, relaxed tail wagging, and a dog can actually be a positive behavior. I'm happy, I'm relaxed, I like what's going on, I'm inviting this interaction. Where conversely in cats, that low tail wagging, where it looks happy and relaxed and loose and wiggly, that can actually be a sign of agitation. So a lot of times what can happen when dogs and cats are not necessarily getting along is not only that cats are acting like prey animals and it can trigger the dogs to start acting like predators, but also it can be miscommunication and misconceptions with body language, because a dog is going to be reading the cat's body language the way it would read another dog's body language, and a cat is going to be reading the dog's body language the way that it would read another cat's body language. So if we do this correctly, we can actually make sure that we have positive interactions between our dogs and cats, and we can actually set them up for success. Another important thing to note is, since there can be a huge size discrepancy between larger dogs and smaller cats, or even larger cats and smaller dogs, I would highly recommend that anytime that they are out together, that it's always supervised. So if you do have to leave the house, make sure that everyone is secured away from each other, so we don't want to accidentally have any sort of altercations or anything happen like that. But also make sure in your house that your cat, if it's the smaller of the two, or even if it's not the smaller of the two, make sure that your cat has plenty of places to go where the dogs cannot follow. So that can be, cat trees, cat condos, ledges on top of the refrigerator, places where the cat can't go. But also make sure if you have a smaller dog, they have places that they can go where the cat can't necessarily follow, because we want to make sure that one party is not super interested in the other, and it's not going to cause any tension or anything like that. So we want to make sure that our interactions are positive and appropriate on both sides. So make sure we supervise, make sure we do it slowly, make sure there's plenty of places for them to have some separation and get away from each other. You can even have a gated community, but also keep in mind that doesn't mean that cats aren't going to necessarily jump over the gates, because cats can do that. So it could be something where you want to utilize more your dog being kept in a kennel or a crate, or maybe some fencing, or maybe the doors are just closed so then nobody has access to the other one.